Okay, I got another, kind of a family children question, but it says this. As Christians, my wife and I are looking at school options for our children. What would you say regarding public, private, or homeschooling?
When I'm looking at all of those issues, what I look at is what's going to be happening with my kids. The Bible talks about the fact that I am supposed to raise my children in the way of the Lord, and that I'm supposed to be honoring God with the way that they're brought up. And so it's my responsibility to make sure that their education is something that's not going to tear them down as a believer. And obviously that brings in the whole issue of homeschool versus public school and that kind of thing. When I look at, let me just deal with the homeschool thing first. I like homeschool. I think it's a pretty cool concept. If you can take a kid and you can have one-on-one instruction with him, then obviously he's going to be ahead of the game. Public school classes right now are right around 30 kids to one teacher, and we have a private school. In our school, we try to keep it around 20 kids to one teacher. If you have one teacher, one kid, that's obviously a better ratio, and so you're going to get more stuff done. The question is, are you going to have one teacher to one kid? That's the question. And so I have seen people get involved with homeschool who had no business homeschooling because they didn't have the discipline and they didn't make sure that their kids did the work. And so what happens is their kids end up having a detrimental experience with school. And then usually what happens is after a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, the homeschool parent decides that they can't do it, and now the kid can be 2 and 3 years behind, and that's not a good thing to do with your kids. And so, if you're going to homeschool, because you want to do the best thing by your kid, then you need to homeschool. You need to make sure that you get it done. And if you can't get it done, if you don't have the talent, you don't have the time, you don't have the wherewithal to get all that stuff done, then even public school can be better than that if you keep your hand on the pulse of what's going on in the classroom. With public school,
can I ask you one thing before you move on?
Yeah.
What about I've heard parents talk about the child and the parent having problems with the teacher-student thing, like they just couldn't learn from their parent.
Well,
and they ended up going into public or a private school because of the relationship was just getting messed up.
Yeah, I think that's a discipline issue.
Okay.
Yeah. You're supposed to be teaching your kids, and so I think that if you're having a problem, being able to bring across to your kid concepts like math and spelling. How are things going with morality and righteousness? Right. It's like we always teach our kids, and so I wouldn't allow that to be the problem. I was more, I was pretty strict with my kids in the sense of there's behavior that's okay, and then there's behavior that's not okay, and not receiving from me is not okay. Mm-hmm. That's the definition of a fool. Somebody who can't receive from somebody. You go through the book of Proverbs, that is a fool. And so you don't allow your kids to be a fool. Now, there may be the way that you're presenting it. And so if you're constantly yelling at your kid because they're not getting their math done, you may need to learn some better tactics than that as far as spurring your kid on and that kind of thing. But I would never let that be a problem. Okay. So if I needed to change something in my attitude or my life, then I would change that. And if my kid just needs to figure out how to grow up and act like a wise person, then I would change that. I wouldn't let that be my decision-making process at that point. It would be whether or not I was talented enough to be a teacher and getting the information across. And so some people can teach and some people can't in that instance. And so I would be watching out for that. with the public schools, we know where the public schools are going, and you have all these agendas that come down the pike, and we have some major ones in Washington State. Some of this stuff with restrooms and the homosexual agenda, and then the transgender agenda. One of the things that the schools have been doing lately, it's been really famously reported in California, is they're not telling kids what's happening in the classroom concerning transgender stuff. And so there was a situation in California, I believe it was at a charter school, where a teacher allowed a first grader to come out as a transgender kid. And so they did a whole ceremony where the kid walks into the bathroom as a little boy, comes walking out dressed as a little girl. They don't tell the parents anything about that, and they didn't have to by law because it wasn't sex education.
First grade.
Yeah, first grade. Had to do with gender identity. And so there was a big kerfuffle about that, and it's still the law. They don't have to worry about that. We have in Washington State there are this is not something that needs to be taught. It's something that goes according to whether or not the teacher wants to teach it, but gender identity, that kind of thing is something that is encouraged to be taught in Washington State schools from kindergarten on. And they have a whole, basically plan on what's supposed to be happening. When it gets to the older kids, the 4th and 5th graders, it starts getting a little bit more insidious. It's insidious in the first place, but it gets a little bit more because they begin talking about people that it is safe to talk with about these issues. And where that's going.
Yeah.
The people who are safe are people who agree with the agenda, and the people who aren't safe are people who don't agree with the agenda, and that can include parents. And so, again, just ridiculous stuff. When I look at the whole issue with public schools, I want my children to be taught. And so if my kid's involved in a public school, I want them to know how to do math. I want them to know how to do reading. I want them to know how to do spelling, and not be dependent upon spell check, and that kind of thing. Reading, writing, arithmetic, those kinds of things. And if that's not going to happen in the public school that I'm looking at, I would be looking for other options. I think that one of the problems with the public school is that the church has abandoned it, and so being a teacher is just awesome because you get to pour into the lives of kids in all kinds of different ways. And so I think that every teacher in the public school system should be Christians. I think we should flood the place, and that would probably turn a whole lot of stuff around. And walking away from it, I don't think is a great idea.
Yeah.
There's some other things you can do that are kind of a combination of homeschool and public school. The public school wants federal dollars, and so they have programs that will allow the homeschoolers to come in and be supervised by teachers in different areas. And so those are cool programs to.
We do that MCP.
Look into. Yeah, the MCP thing. I did that too with Bethany. And then private school. We have a private Christian school, and we can teach what we want about who Jesus is and what the Bible's about, and we can teach history that's actually history and not a revision, and we can teach math the way we want to.
Yes.
Yeah. So. One of the things that's been happening with it, and I'm talking about some of the new ideas about how to teach math. Some of the stuff that we're seeing from public school kids coming into our private school is that they're way behind in math, and it's hard for them to keep up because what they've done is they're trying to teach these concepts that should actually probably be taught in college. As far as math goes, kids need to know that 2 + 2 = 4, and be able to do it in a simple way. I used to work in construction. If I the whole math thing that they have kids doing now. If a guy came on my crew and started taking blocks of wood and doing this long calculation on an addition problem or a subtraction problem or a division problem that takes 2 or 3 blocks of wood, I would fire him. He wouldn't be working for me. And so I think that the best laid plans of mice and men, things can go awry. And I think that that's something that's going to go awry. So, those are things that I'd be looking for. If I had to have my kid in a public school, I would be absolutely involved. I would be talking to teachers, that kind of thing. And my kid has done homeschool. My kid has done MCP. My kid has done private school, and my kid has done public school too. Private schools, like I was saying, they're cool because you can, usually the class sizes are smaller, and I can tell you for sure our teachers are not there for the money because we don't pay them enough.
Yeah.
And they're there because they love the kids and they love the Lord. And so,
and when you say that, you don't pay them enough, because if you did, the prices, it would price everybody out.
Yeah.
In fact,
exactly.
Most private schools are so expensive, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Certain ones.
Yeah. We're lucky because with our private school, we have a building, and I don't charge a school for the building, and it's our school, and so you'd be basically just be charging. Well, you'd be charging the parents for that, and so we have the building there, and so it might as well get used, and that's our thought behind that, and we want to minister to people, so we try to keep the tuitions down so that we can do exactly that. If we had more money, we could do more things, but we try to do the best with what we have, and it's a pretty cool thing. It's a pretty cool job.
Yeah.
So we have a number of private schools in town, and they can all be good. One of the thing, again, the thing about a private Christian school is you don't want to bail on your responsibility with the teaching of your children, and especially in the area of morality. And I think of every area. If I knew my kid was failing in math or something, I would be all over that. It's my responsibility to make sure my kid can have a job because he knows how to add.
Sure.
And so, but a lot of times what people do is they take their kids and they drop them off someplace and expect somebody else basically to train them in all kinds of areas, including morality and stuff. And one of the things that you have with private schools is that you have parents of kids who are having problems in the public schools, and they have to pull them out of public school. Sometimes they're kicked out of public school, and they go to a private school to hopefully get their lives turned around and things like that. And we have kids like that, and we try to minister to them and bring them to Jesus and that kind of thing. But you have to understand that even in private schools, you have kids that are non-Christians, and especially in some private schools, you can have situations where it's a Christian school, and there are a large number of non-Christians who are pretending to be Christians in that situation, and that can be detrimental to a kid. So, if you can't homeschool, you have to be involved with your kid and watching out for them. It's an important thing. So, yeah.
So 2 more thoughts on that. Number one, I've heard, and this is before I had kids, a lot of people said, well, I don't like homeschool because all the homeschooler kids are socially weird and they're at home and they are sheltered, and they get out or they go to high school or college and then they rebel or whatever because they haven't been socialized, whatever. I found that, and I'll let you answer that, but I found that is totally not true. My kids are more social. I mean, they go to MCP, they go to church. They're more social than I ever was at their age, and they're homeschooled. So I don't know if you want to comment about that, but also you mentioned that your kids did all of it. They ran the gamut on all those schools. Is that based off stages of life or off personality? Because obviously you've done all of them. So as a parent, what are you looking at?
Well, what happened with us was I wasn't able to homeschool my kids because I'm the dad and I was at work, and so I wasn't able to do that. So my wife was doing it, and she did a decent job, but it wasn't that great, and she didn't like it, and so we started doing MCP, and so this was all with Bethany, and so she would go to MCP, and that kind of took a lot of the heat off my wife and that kind of thing. And then we started a private school at church. And so when we started the private school, because of my wife's talents and that kind of stuff, we decided that it would be better for her to go to our private school. My son started off at our private school and just stayed there. When my daughter got to be in junior high, we sent her to another private school in town, and that was because our school didn't go up through junior high at the time. And so she went there, and she went there up through her sophomore year, and that wasn't so great. That's why I'm saying you need to be way involved in with your kids, whatever school they go to. She had some real difficulties because she was kind of breaking into a school where the kids had all grown up together, and you have those kinds of issues. And there was a lot of I don't want to trash the whole school, but there was a lot of fakery going on there. And the teachers were awesome, the administrators were awesome, but a lot of the kids weren't held accountable. And so they're pretending to, they're partying on the weekend and then they're leading the chapel service.
Right.
Yeah, that's not good ever. That's not good. And so it caused some problems. She went to, when she got into her junior year, we decided to do Running Start with her. And so that school wasn't able to support that whole thing. And so at that point, we had to enroll her in a public school. And so she took like one class at public school, and the rest of it she took over at CBC. And that ended up not working out for her. And so her senior year, she ended up being over at the public school, and she took a minimal number of classes. But one of the things, cool things about the public school at that point in her life was that anybody who was in that public school and was saying that they were a Christian, they were usually a Christian. Mm-hmm. They weren't. Nobody was doing that to look good, or none of that stuff was going on. So that was a cool thing. My son just did private school all the way up through junior high, and when he got into high school, again we had a handle on him. We watched out for him, and so his freshman and sophomore year, he went to Southridge High School, and then he too went to CBC. And by the time he got out of high school, he graduated with his AA. So great program. Just an awesome thing. And I just kept a handle on him the whole time. And so his junior and senior year, his involvement in the high school aspect of it was pretty minimal, and it was pretty much just going to college. And even though he's exposed to some nonsense over there, we had some good talks about that. Yeah. And a lot of the teachers over there are I could tell that they're pretty protective of the Running Start students. So that was a pretty cool thing too. So
you notice the theme that I'm noticing with this, and this goes to our last week's show when we were talking about like mental health stuff and liberties and stuff, is parenting. Mm-hmm. Whether you're at any stage in life, with your kids being socially weird or whatever, they're going public school, private school, it's the job of the parent to drive your kids in those certain areas and make sure they're taken care of, right, and not somebody else, not dropping them off at Sunday school or whatever school. It's your parent. You got to be on that.
And the whole weird thing with kids getting weird in homeschool, that's a parenting issue again. Because I have known kids that were like that, because of what the parents did was they took them and they stuck them by themselves, and they never let them be around any other kids. Famously at our church, it's like we've had parents that didn't want their kids in our Sunday school because there are non-Christians in our Sunday school. Well, that's exactly what we want. We want non-Christians in our Sunday school. And so instead of, using that as an opportunity to minister to the kids who were coming in from outside, what they did was they just kind of threw their hands up and went, unclean, unclean, and ran away or something. And that is not the way that life is supposed to go. That's not what Jesus called us to. And so that's a parenting issue. That's not a kid issue. That's not a homeschool issue. That's a parenting issue. It's a parenting choice, and it's not a wise one. And again, the whole thing with I've seen kids that got to 18 years old and turned around and walked away from the Lord and went full blown into the world. And I think that, again, that can be a parenting thing. Not always, but it can be a parenting thing. And so your kids need to know how to interact with kids who don't know the Lord, and so that can, I don't have to go and throw them into, a shark infested pool,
right,
with a bunch of kids that are just going to mess them up. But I do need to be able to show them how to interact with kids and how to make the right choices and follow Jesus in the midst of it. With Sunday school, with my kids, I'm the pastor, so they were there at 2 and 3 services the whole time that they were growing up. And so first service was always for them. They went in, they had a good time and that kind of stuff. And if we were staying for second, and we have had 3 services before, usually third service, my wife would take them home. But if we were staying there for second service is all about the other kids. And so my wife would always have my kids pick the one kid that was in the class and nobody was talking to. Make sure you find out what his name is. Make sure that you talk to, that you share with them, that you're being nice with them and that kind of stuff. And so it was always ministry. And usually those kids were the non-Christian kids. So my girl is going up talking to the little non-Christian boy or girl that's coming to Sunday school for the first time and is all freaked out. So yeah, it's ministry. So
okay.